Hello, Bill.
Hello, Sandy. How are you?
Fine.
I love the little that you do.
Do we stop and restart?
Why? You can't keep that in there.
I will. Only if you tell people what you were just asking for.
I was asking for a wig, so my hair would be as big as yours.
Anyway, this evening, speaking of seeing, art shop.
Art shop. Okay.
And it is sort of to do with a conversation I had with a friend where we were looking at some very cheaply reproduced Banksy style paintings, artwork somewhere. And I thought it was grotesque how the what they were. And it got me thinking about how we commodify art. And I think we've spoken before about commodification of art in a very loose sense. But I wonder if we could give it a go tonight in a more specific way.
How do you feel about Banksy in general? Do you have a feeling about Banksy?
I love.
Wait, hold on a second. Are you Banksy? That's question number one.
How would you ever know?
I wouldn't know. That's why I'm asking straight out. You're not going to answer, are you?
Of course not.
Bum, bum, bum.
Do I like Banksy? I like what Banksy stood for, I suppose.
Okay.
And I see that as the kind of fame and notoriety of Banksy's work has evolved over time, so too has a kind of legend that is, of course, part of the language of Banksy, but at the same time, I rather resent it, because I think there are too many people who possibly don't, dare I say, understand the kind of perhaps the core of
the satire of it.
Meaning. Yeah.
I mean, do you feel like in some ways he wants it both? Well, I'm assuming it's a he. I mean, there's guesses that it is a he, but whatever. So let me ask you a question. So do you think that you are trying to have it both ways by being Banksy and selling lots of art and making lots of money, but also trying to take the piss out of the art market simultaneously?
I think there are lots of artists that do that, of course. I mean, Damien Hirst does that all the time.
Sure, but he's even more of a than Banksy is, I think.
What does that mean? Can you please translate yourself?
Well, I don't want to get in trouble with any Hirstiites out there, but I think that there are people who are making art, and then there are people who are. It is the art equivalent of the Kardashians versus somebody who's actually done something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I suppose we could argue then, or not argue, but at least look at. I mean, the Kardashians are a really good example. What have they done?
Superficiality over substance, that kind of thing.
And yet they are part of our culture, right? So
they are
still vital, actually. Are they not?
No.
No, but there's a kind of weird reciprocity through culture, isn't there?
Where yes, you could say that because they are so popular and famous, then they are now have given themselves the import that makes them popular and famous in the first place.
Yes. And perhaps we could say the same thing about art and artists.
Sure. Yeah. I think though, there are a lot of people though who, oh my God, I love that guy because he makes giant balloon animals or whatever. And like, that's all they really know about somebody. They don't really know anything. They just like giant balloon animals, and those are cool and red and shiny. And therefore we're going to, you see what I'm saying? Like that kind of.
Hang on there. I mean, I've already done it myself and I need to watch it. This superiority that we believe ourselves to have above others because we perhaps are educated, or we perhaps think we're educated. What folly it is to not see that, there are many instances where to see the thing as it is as relevant, perhaps more relevant actually, than what some academic study of the thing might be.
I don't claim that it should all be about academic studies, but I think that there are certainly people who are putting on spectacle because spectacle and PR are more important than ideas are actual work in our modern society.
I do think ideas are very important. I've always thought that. I would say that, you know, concept-driven art often to me is more interesting.
Yeah.
But like you, I do appreciate craft.
Mm-hmm.
The craft of something, the technical skill that goes into making. However, perhaps there is a synthesis between that great craft and those great ideas that brings about art that is elevated. And I'm wondering,
go ahead.
I'm wondering if someone like Banksy, you know, is there a great craft to what Banksy does? Probably not. There's some craft to it, but not a great craft. But then that's also then looking at what I would expect to be a great craft for art. Like, at what point does process become great? You know, do we all have to paint like Leonardo da Vinci, as we're going to see in a minute, to deserve, in the eyes of the world, the accolade? Or could we do anything, something so simple, Picasso and a napkin, or
sure.
You know, where is the cutoff between greatness and not greatness?
Yeah. But I think if Picasso only ever, you know, made a sketch on a napkin, I don't think he would be Picasso. That napkin is worth something because he's Picasso, because he did the other things, you know. I also wonder about the question of, you know, populist art. If art is understood by 90% of the population, could it possibly be something that is disrupting society? Or is it then, you know what I mean? Like, can disruptive art actually be popular? Because if it is popular, it's probably not disruptive. See what I'm getting at there?
I do.
And I mean, again, I'm not a sociologist or an art historian or know about anything that I'm talking about. But these are just thoughts that I generally have in my head a lot of times. And I'm certainly not somebody who makes work that is outside of the, you know, I am not in the fancy tower or anything myself anyway, but yeah.
You know, one of the hardest conversations to have with students, especially the A-level students who are just leaving and who often want to give like a financial value to their work,
Sure,
is how they can price their work so that it's fair and also meaningful to them.
That is a question that people have even at age 46, I can tell you.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I think it surprises artists starting out that their time is actually worth something.
Yeah, or, well, here's the problem. You want to think it's worth something, but most people in society will think that it's not worth anything.
Will they?
And that's part of the problem. Oh, yes.
But we're talking also, just to go back to your point about if something is popular, is it disruptive? Is something that's disruptive can it ever be popular? What how to make the link? Something that's disruptive, can it have value? Can you buy something that's disruptive?
Yeah, or by it having value, is that already pulling it into the mainstream?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about Banksy.
Sure.
His Dismaland project. And the idea that, you know, it was paradising, well, obviously Disneyland, but the fact that there's essentially one great big money-making machine that can be shit, that we kind of sell ourselves into buying for the sake of it.
But if we're dumb enough to buy, who's to say that it doesn't, in the same way as your Kardashian argument, hey, if it works and people buy it, who's to say that it is bad and shit, as you put it?
Well, I mean, that was the point of Dismaland. I don't know did you know about Dismaland?
Yeah, I know of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
you know what's interesting about it, and it's something that Disneyland and this do really well, is playing with perspective and size of things. You know, It's like, famously everything in Disneyland on Main Street is 5/8 the height that it should be, because these people figured out that 5/8 psychologically makes you feel like you have control over your space around you, and therefore you get more comfortable.
Yeah.
And just having that woman or person, in the middle there with the pink sort of just shows you, it's like, well, this stuff's really not that big. This isn't a big castle. This thing's, 30 feet high or whatever.
For people who don't know about this, so this was a
project
by Banksy in Weston-super-Mare in 2015, and it was a gathering, a collection of I think there was like 190 artists, including Damien Hirst and Jenny Holzer and so on, and they all contributed something that was, I guess, kind of subversive in some way. And the idea about this kind of Disneyland fantasy, perfect picture, but utterly corrupt world is somehow sort of exposed. And there was a lot of stuff in this exhibition that was created as a theme park where you were asked to spend money on shit. And you knew you were spending money on shit. But of course, as you're pointing out, how shit is the thing when you're spending the money on it and you're the person who chooses that.
Yep.
But I mean, that was
it's so deep, Sandi. It's like writes itself. It's like edgy. No, I'm not saying what you're saying. I'm saying the fact that like it's it's like you're watching Exit Through the Gift Shop is the same way,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I'm of two minds. You want to say the hell with you, and you also want to say, yeah, that's pretty good.
Yep. I had the same thing, I've talked maybe a little before. I've never shown anything from it, but Hirst's Treasures from the Wreck of the Unbelievable.
Okay.
So I saw that exhibition in Venice 4 years ago, I think.
Right.
And it took over huge, expansive spaces in beautiful palazzo and then over the water as well. And these grand, temples really to art. And the entire exhibition was built on deception, where I go in the exhibition, I believe that there are treasures in this exhibition that Hirst and his team have genuinely unearthed from the seabed. They've discovered the city of Atlantis or an equivalent, and they've retrieved these objects and they're sharing them with the world. And everything is designed to support that so that your belief is utterly invested in what you're being what you're being sold. And as you walk around, you notice that, of course, these things are just fake, fantasy things, things meant to be from 1,000 years ago when it's Mickey Mouse covered in barnacles, or, it's laid out like a kind of historical or anthropological museum of artifacts. Most bizarre, because I obviously knew, like virtually every other visitor, that I was going to be messed with. And I am very gullible, and I like to let myself be taken along a little bit for the ride. But I could see that, if you invest in art psychologically, you can be sold a lie so easily. What does that say about us as viewers?
Well, it also, I mean, I think we've talked about this at least once before, but what percentage of the population has ever actually been to an art museum in the West? It's probably 10%.
You think so?
Maybe 20. I think it's far lower than you think. Okay, in the last 5 years, have you been to an art exhibit? 10, 15% maybe is my guess. So, I mean, even within the people what percentage of people in America or the UK, well, probably more in the UK, but even know who Banksy is? It's probably less than a quarter.
I don't know. He is quite sensational, here.
Yeah, right. I'm not saying in the UK maybe a little bit more because he probably gets more press, but
Yeah.
but does my mother know who Banksy is? My mother's not a stupid woman, but like I don't know that she follows art enough to know. Yeah, I'll text her right now. Let's find out.
Live on Speaking of Seeing.
Yeah, as they like to say in the things, real time follow up.
Yeah, as it's unfolding. This is thrilling, Bill.
Here we go. Do you know who Banksy is?
Can I just ask?
Yes.
When you're looking at the screen, is the light in my space flickering in and out?
No. Is it?
Tell me if it does, because they are actually doing that, and it's getting darker outside now. So.
Oh, okay, yeah. But so I mean, I think that in some ways, even us talking about any of this the way we do is already in such a minority situation.
I know.
Are you talking about our listenership or what are you getting at?
Dwindling, Bill.
Well, it doesn't matter. We do it for us. That's what matters. But it is, I don't know. It's well, okay. So where did you want to go with this particular piece? Did you have a thought?
Well, the main thing is as an art shop idea.
Yep.
When does art become great enough to be sold? And is the selling of art the thing that makes it great? Kind of like, can art exist without it having a value?
Yes, it can.
Right. So if art exists without it having a value, where can we find it?
I think art and the business of art are two different things.
Okay.
Where do we find value if not in the monetary value of something? Well, where do we find the value of anything other than the monetary value of it?
So then the other part of this is when we do give...
Maybe our problem is the definition of value.
Yes. So I would say then when we do give a financial fiscal value to something, does it make it greater?
Well, that is a good question. I mean, if I can, let's say I'd take pictures of somebody for a couple $1,000s, but I find some other person who would pay me $20,000 to take the same pictures. Are those pictures 10 times better than they were when I did the same work for $2,000? I found a sucker and therefore, like my value of my work goes up. I mean, I think the problem with, that have we talked about the whole CIA abstract expressionism thing? Apparently, I read an article that's saying that the CIA paid a bunch of rich people to buy abstract expressionist art in the 50s in order to prop up American art in comparison to communist art coming out of the Soviet Union. And that it was something, no, this actually happened. And so you kind of wonder, did de Kooning and Pollock and all these people become famous because the CIA basically decided that they would become famous in order to prop up our Western, democratic capitalist system versus some communist system on the other side of the world? And that had nothing to do with the fact that de Kooning and Pollock made great paintings, etc. And if that was true, if you could, put out the numbers enough that it was true, does that make you think less of de Kooning and Pollock now? I don't know. And if so, what does it matter if you still like, woman number one or whatever it is?
Do you think
these are all very big questions?
Like Dismaland, if you went to something like Dismaland,
yes,
you would be engaged all the time in understanding what it meant to be there.
It's interesting because if you went in knowing you're going to see some Banksy thing, right? I think that you would purposefully be unpacking the layers in order to try to understand it like a little puzzle, like what is he trying to say? Who's he trying to take down a peg, or is this all like exit through the gift shop kind of made me feel at the end of it? is this all just one big illusion that's trying to make me feel like an idiot or look like an idiot?
Hmm.
You know,
because
with somebody like
people who went into Dismaland and
yeah,
did stand there and pay £5 for some utter tat that was designed to, at least at first glance, it was designed to make you know you were spending money on nothing.
yeah.
But
Yet people still did it, right?
All the people did it. So
yeah,
did those people in their crowd think we're being such idiots?
No, they probably thought they were deep.
They thought they were participating maybe in artwork.
No, I think that they thought that they were cool by at all understanding or thinking they understood what was going on. And I think that's part of my problem with artists like Banksy. I mean, obviously the, paste up simpler stuff that he did at the beginning of his career, a lot of those are really cool. I like a lot of that stuff. Some of it gets a little overwrought, but I thought that was kind of, oh, that's interesting and fun. And he's just doing it and that kind of thing. Some of his later stuff, I can't tell whether I'm in on the joke or I am the butt of the joke. And
does that affect you?
Yeah, it makes me generally not want to engage because I don't like people who are mean to other people. And I feel like there's at least a little bit of people like Banksy where their point is to kind of make fun of some people who are coming to the show, and I feel like that's disrespectful to others. And I know some people like that part of it, this sort of, I don't know, it's this anti establishment kind of, haha, I pulled one over on you and you're the idiot. But I don't, yeah.
The reaction I had at the Hearst exhibition with these treasures, I don't buy into the sense that by being duped, I'm an idiot, actually.
You don't buy into that?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Instead, I just seem to enjoy being spun a yarn.
Sure. But you like that, like you said, you like being taken for a ride. You see it as I'm going to see a movie essentially. And like, I'm going along for the ride. And when I leave, I can let whatever things washed over me go. Right. Are you that kind of person?
Label. This is the first label of the evening, Bill. Thank you.
I'm not trying to label. I'm just trying to get some sense of how you see it. I walk out and I would carry that with me. So therefore I don't like that feeling where you could feel like, oh, I got duped, but like, oh, I see what they were doing there. And haha, good one, Banksy. I mean, me, when you're looking in a mirror. So for me, it's less of it's less fun for me.
I mean, what do you think?
Do you think looking at art should be fun?
No, not always.
Right. Sorry, I cut you off.
Just thinking about the Banksy piece that was sold at auction for $1 million.
The one that shredded itself?
And then it shredded itself as the hammer.
I thought that was kind of cool.
Right. So, the buyer still wanted it, paid the $1 million.
Of course, because it's probably actually worth more than it would have been had it not been half shredded. Because now it's that piece that's famous for having been shredded and in all the magazines. So that's the kind of thing that's the thing about Banksy, is that like he can do that little trick, but in the end, he's doing it in such a way that he still has the high profile. And if anything, it adds to the value of the thing that he's doing. It's very clever.
Oh, so, okay. So let's say that the Mona Lisa goes out into the open market.
Wait, can we back up and just say that the Mona Lisa is really only the Mona Lisa because it got stolen 100 and whatever years ago and became a big media sensation. No one gave a crap about Mona Lisa in 1820.
No, you're right. There are many things about Mona Lisa that are unusual in terms of it being the most famous painting in the world.
Yeah.
But to think about Banksy and his shredded artwork that is still worth $1 million, and that, as you say, is possibly worth more now because it was shredded as an act, a part of its performative being, really. It can
By the way,
imagine,
that was a good idea, though. That
yeah.
was a clever idea. Yeah, go ahead.
But if the same were true and the Mona Lisa comes up for auction and you and I are there at Sotheby's having won £1 billion, we're there with our paddle,
Yes.
and we bid on the Mona Lisa.
Yep.
And then as the hammer strikes, the Mona Lisa is going to go to Sandi Robertson, not you, Bill Wadman.
Yeah. Hey, why do you get it?
Because I hold my nerve.
Okay, go ahead.
You lose your lunch too easily.
All right, go ahead.
And then suddenly,
Yeah,
it shreds. Like,
yeah. The board falls down, and if somebody drops a lighter fluid, somebody put lighter fluid on it, lights it on fire.
like officially advised performance.
Right? Is that still worth $1 million?
Then across the platform, crushes the Mona Lisa. As you say,
Yep.
some lighter fluid has accidentally spilled there earlier when the auctioneer was trying to light a joint or something.
Fill a Zippo or something, yeah.
And the whole thing.
Yep. Now it's a pile of ash. Is that still the same as what?
Is it worth the money?
I would say no, and I would say, well, no, obviously, but I think that the reason is that Mona Lisa is what Mona Lisa is and has been for 500 years, where the Banksy piece was new and maybe even unfinished at that point.
Okay, so
and he knew because the artist was still alive to decide all of that.
But so are you saying then that time and intention impacts how value is ascribed?
I think in this case, the market would say that the Mona Lisa, a pile of ash that used to be the Mona Lisa, is not the Mona Lisa. The problem is that ultimately all of this has to do with a market that has nothing to do with the art. You know what I mean? Do you think it does have something to do with the art?
I don't know.
I mean, the bigger question might be, would we appreciate the painting as much if the bottom half of it burned? Would people love it as much?
Like if it gets a little cigarette burn in it, would anyone?
Yeah. Well, look at how much, I mean, things like that have happened, right? Wynn famously fell, right, or tripped and put his hand through a Degas or something like that, right? A few years ago, Steve Wynn. There's lots of artwork that is in some ways famous because of things that happened to it,
Right. So the life of the work has an independence, and that independence allows greater value.
And I think the story of that work in history also, if somebody suddenly found the Rembrandt that got stolen from the Gardner Museum, and it was cut out of its frame, I think, and so it's going to be losing its edges. Would that still be worth a lot of money? Yeah, probably more so because it was that thing that was stolen and lost for 40 years, But
I can't remember which artist it was, but it was an early Renaissance fresco artist.
Guys, can you say fresco again, please?
Fresco.
That's so good. Go ahead.
We talked about this maybe off camera. The woman who lived in the local village went to restore the fresco independently. She just thought it needed a bit of touching up.
Sure.
And so she ruined this vital piece of art history.
Yeah.
Made the colors really gaudy. The figure form was, disaster. Yeah, I wonder how many more people have gone to see it now that she's messed it up.
Sure.
And ever would have made a pilgrimage to see that beautiful work in its rather shabby state after centuries of disrepair and neglect. And that's the point, isn't it? It was neglected.
Of course. Yeah.
Which is why it was allowed to fall into such disrepair.
Which is why she did the damage in the first place. Yeah.
And then if we widen that out, and we think about how careless we are careless with our culture.
Yep.
We don't pay attention to it in the way perhaps we could.
Well, I think a lot of times we don't know what is important until later because, we don't decide that. They decide that in the future, what was important back now.
Yeah. Anyway, the reason why I put Mona Lisa on here actually was also because I wanted us to think a little bit about merchandise.
Sure.
And actually, I took it out, but I had a pair of socks with the Mona Lisa.
Yeah. So if Mona Lisa, let's say Mona Lisa is worth $1 billion, right? Like, some ridiculous amount of money. What's the most money that's ever been spent on something? A few hundred million? I think card players, maybe the
200 million, I think.
Yeah, something like that, right? Somewhere around there. So let's just say for shits and giggles, Mona Lisa is worth $1 billion, which as this kind of thing, yeah, great, $1 billion. Has the Louvre made hundreds of millions of dollars on licensing Mona Lisa picture? Absolutely.
Of course.
They probably made $1 billion on Mona Lisa.
In fact, there was an article in the New Yorker about this because of COVID and the desperate bid for the Louvre to make back some of the money it had lost. They had teamed up with Uniqlo or one of the clothing stores.
Yeah.
So that they would actually make Mona Lisa t-shirts and sell them in the gift shop. And I mean, of course.
Do you think there's something wrong with that?
And
if so, what is wrong with it?
I don't know. Can I read you something?
Sure.
So I actually sent this to you the other day.
Yep.
So I've been reading Flights by Olga Tokarczuk. And do you remember this? It says,
yes.
A guy in a cafeteria of this one museum said that nothing gives him such great satisfaction as being in the presence of an original artwork. He also insisted that the more copies there are in the world, the greater the power of the original becomes, the power sometimes approaching the great might of a holy relic. For what is singular is significant, what with the threat of destruction hanging over it as it does. Confirmation of these words came in the form of a nearby cluster of tourists who, with fervent focus, stood worshipping a painting by Leonardo da Vinci. Just occasionally, when one of them couldn't take it anymore, there came the clearly audible click of a camera, sounding like an amen spoken in a new digital language.
I love all of that except for the part about the camera at the end.
Why?
Well, I'm going to sound like a complete hypocrite because there have been times when I've been at MoMA and just taken pictures of stuff and sent it to you as a joke of where I was.
Yes.
I generally don't take pictures of artwork when I'm there. Because if I want a picture of it, the official pictures of it are going to be way better than anything I take with my phone or whatever camera I have with me and the lighting that's available in a museum. And in some ways, I would rather have the memory of the experience of seeing Guernica than, a big picture of Guernica that's on my phone. I think it's disruptive to the people around you, but go ahead.
Just also take this out again and look at it in a bigger way.
Yep.
So, you and I, especially you, of course, are
have access. Oh, okay.
And again, we have mentioned before this idea that when we are actually participating in a moment or we are in a moment, if we're making a photograph of the moment, we're not really in the moment. True. in the way that we otherwise might be. So the memory, having just a memory, as a sort of notion, as a thing, that is so special. Just to have your memory, that's all we have. If we want to be in the past, which all artwork is, why do we even make art, Bill? Off the back of this, like, why do we make up? Because I'm sure actually lots of people, when they really look at that, would say, actually, I want to live. I don't want to spend my life with dead things.
And there are a lot of people who would say that.
A mausoleum to our memory. It's what we're doing all the time when we make artwork.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I will say that most of the time that I make stuff, I don't know, I get joy out of the act of creation.
Really?
I You're being sarcastic right now. I love the idea that there wasn't something, and now through sheer force of will, there is something.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's something magic about that. That's actual conjuration to me. You know, like there's something just inherently beautiful about that. But if somebody comes and sees a picture of mine that's on a wall, say,
Mm-hmm.
or watches a short film that I've made, I want them to look at it or watch it. I don't want them to be worried about recording it again. You know, I've already made it. You don't need to make another one of it. It's there. Just look at it.
Also, is that though because you want the glory of it to yourself?
No. Because then you could argue that there would be more glory if they take a picture of it and then go and show it to their friend and say, "Oh, look at this great picture I saw," or
Well, I mean,
"Look at this
that's what
shit picture that I saw that's on the wall." And
that's what the
say
writer
again.
was saying there. You know, this idea that the person about which we're listening is somebody who believes that the power of an original artwork is actually elevated, grown exponentially through the reproduction of it.
Right. But I imagine that reproduction being on socks and, prints in dorm rooms of college freshmen and stuff. I don't imagine it as on 27,000 million people's iPhone photo rolls.
But in the case of what we think of as like world,
especially by the way, the Mona Lisa, where you can't get within 10 feet of it and the thing is this big.
But with world famous artwork, where we have a glut of merchandise, it's available everywhere. No, you don't even have to go to the museum gift shop. You can go anywhere and find the Mona Lisa somewhere.
Sure.
Does that actually devalue it in another way? No. Do we become complacent? There's a really excellent little short about Ansel Adams. I can't remember the man's name. Does YouTube little documentaries, very short documentaries. And he was making the point that, you might go to your doctor and there'll be an Ansel Adams on the wall and we look at it and we don't even register it.
It's just, oh, look at that pretty landscape, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I think there's all kinds of things.
I think there's a big part of it has to do with whether or not what you're doing has respect for the artwork. I think that there's times and places where you're reproducing the artwork and you understand what it is and why you're putting it up. And that's, so you're still, there's some, and I'm not a religious person, but I'm going to use the word reverence involved in how you are displaying a copy of something, I think that there's something to that. I think that there's also a situation where somebody thinks, well, look at mountains, and puts the poster up on the wall and doesn't even understand what it is or why that picture is good or the technical skill it takes to create it.
But we're back now to this idea of like popular culture, populist worldview.
Yeah.
Is it so bad?
I've never been much of a populist.
No, but is it so bad to be? Again, even the fact that I would say that we're privileged because we have the other thing. Do we have anything at all? We just have a different.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, like just to take a example from say music, right? Nevermind by Nirvana was a huge hit, but also a critical darling. People who thought about music thought that Nirvana is coming and Smells Like Teen Spirit was a pivotal point in music, in pop music. And it happened to be that tens of millions of people bought the record. So in that case, those two things synergize. So it's not that they're mutually exclusive, but it also doesn't mean that every crappy number one song that hits the charts and gets to number one is, art on the level of, a Beatles record or whatever. Those things are in similar ways to the differences between art and the music and the business of art being two separate things. that sometimes collide in a positive feedback loop. I think it oftentimes the two have nothing to do with each other. There's a lot of crap for sale that is terrible that people spend a lot of money on, and there's a lot of stuff that is amazing that never sees the light of day. But I can also go to a gallery a lot of times and see some stuff that's pretty great. You know, I think the bigger question is, and this isn't to disparage this topic at all, but I've thought a lot about this kind of stuff, is does any of what we're saying matter in the long run? You know,
well,
people are gonna
doesn't.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, what is the purpose of all this talking? You and I have talked now for many months.
Oh, months and months.
I know, it just goes on and on, for Christ's sake. You know, sometimes what we say is interesting to us, and sometimes what we say isn't even interesting to you or I.
True.
We get to points in what we say where I just think, oh, shut up.
To both of us or just me?
To both of us.
Okay, good.
Not just you, although I do think it more about you.
Of course, yeah.
So I'm aware that there's no real currency in one way about what we do, and yet in another way, of course, I understand also that sometimes there are things that come out of our conversations that, as you've pointed out, we do it for ourselves. Yes, I have an agenda because sometimes I share these with students who might then have some platform from which to write about a particular piece of artwork or something. But
do you ever come out of our conversations changed? Do I ever convince you of anything or make you think about things in a different way?
You do make me think about things. I'm very grateful for that.
Right, but you don't. But you're
actually, you know, I don't underestimate that. You know, we're joking about lots of things and not taking it very seriously sometimes, but actually, yeah, I'm always very grateful for our conversations.
But I feel like there's I think that the transmutation of even or our ability to, I don't know, solidify our own thoughts about these things by bouncing them off each other is valuable and growth inducing to you and I, regardless of third parties listening in, right?
Yes, and that's what I mean. Though I don't think I come away and I have a particular sense that you've changed my mind or anything like that. One, my mind is not fixed.
Yeah.
But also, you know, I don't have to be directed. Yet I feel nourished, and it brings up, if not questions, it makes me pay more attention. And I find this all the time, is that we don't pay attention to things.
Sure.
You know, what do you think though that an hour is paying attention?
But do you think that there is a danger in overanalysis of any of this stuff?
Sometimes I don't think we're actually overanalyzing, or indeed maybe
analyzing enough.
Analyzing. I think we're looking together, and is inquiring, analyzing.
Good question.
Like, I feel like I'm inquiring.
Right.
I mean, yes, I have my book filled with my notes, and that's very much about facts. So I try and get my facts right after my early days of sometimes not getting a fact right and people getting very annoyed about it. So I try and get my facts right. But beyond that, really, I mean, I don't think we're analysing. And we have never said that anything we put forward here is a truth or something that others have to agree with.
Speak for yourself, sister. If people don't agree with me, they can just,
hit the road.
I mean, there is a big part of, you go to Museum of Modern Art and everyone goes around, Starry Night, and they go around the Five Mademoiselles, Picasso, and they go, they go around Canyons, Rauschenberg, and whatever, these like pieces that are really well known. And you wonder, is it because those are actually the best pieces, or those pieces have just had the best PR over time, or they have the best story behind them? And you could also say, well, what's the difference?
I love all the stories.
I know. Does a story ever make you love a otherwise mediocre piece of art, though?
That's very tricky because how does one separate the story from the thing?
Sure.
No, I'm sure very clever people do that.
We're not so clever.
I'm not very clever. Anyway,
Yeah,
well, if I could, I'd
yes.
buy a pair of socks with dancers in motion.
Okay, I'll make that happen.
And I would.
I'm not sure those would print very well on socks, but I'll take it under advisement.
Can I have a T-shirt, please?
Sure.
A T-shirt with dancers in motion.
I'll have one made.
Yeah. UK size small. Thank you.
I have to ship it over to you. Aren't there places over there that I could just send a file and they'll make you a T-shirt and ship it to you?
When next you see me, I'll be sitting here wearing my Dancers in Motion T-shirt.
That would actually be kind of funny. That'd be kind of cool. I should start making. Are you saying I should make merch?
Merch. I want to shove people's tongues down their throat when they use that word.
What are you talking about? It's merch.
Oh. Anyway. We could merchandise you to the hilt.
Do you like Mona Lisa?
Spend enough time looking at her.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Do you think if somebody changed this painting in some way, like, I don't know, the thing over her shoulder was a slightly different color or turned a little bit, or in the background that road didn't go, or the water was on the other side, would you notice?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
But
I don't know that I have that kind of detail.
A lot of time looking at it, and so up to a point, there's that thing that we've already said. You know, complacency is bred through familiarity, and you know, it's like, do you ever notice when like someone in your family comes in and they've got a new haircut or more? Do you notice when your child gets taller? No.
Sure.
It just kind of arrives at itself. So, do you like the Mona Lisa, Bill?
It's never been my favorite painting. No.
Do you think she's the most beautiful woman in the world?
No.
No. Lots of children ask me that. They ask me, is she meant to be beautiful, miss? Because she's not. It's the kind of thing they say.
Is that more the men or more the women, or both?
Both.
I mean, there's also the arguments for and against, cultural definitions of beauty at the time of it was painted, I mean, all of this kind of stuff. Somebody put up a thing of, that very Mozart hair with the ponytail and the curls on the side, the wigs and all that kind of stuff. And they said, a few hundred years ago, woman saw a guy like this and she'd be like, rum, and we look at it now and we just think it's funny. So who's to say, By the way, real-time follow-up. My mother has not answered. So we're going to have to save that one until next week.
Oh, wow.
It's like I'm not even her son. This is what we've learned. She doesn't even care. Doesn't have the time to answer my texts.
Who does ever have the time to answer your texts?
Suddenly I'm the needy one. Okay, I got it. Okay.
Anyway, Bill, I will see you next week.
All right. Thank you, Sandi. Good talk.